everyone. So welcome back, and I'm just gonna, I've been putting this off for a while. So Sylvie Dow, Coach Sylvie and Dow Training Systems, and what is this? This is my interview cycling series. It's going to turn into a podcast, and it's called Secrets from the Saddle because it's all cycling related. And the reason why I put this together is my own passion for cycling. I've been in and around it since 2001 when I opened up my first spinning studio, got into masters racing, started a women's cycling club. Now I'm coaching and I'm looking at doing other cycling related projects in this area. So I've always been curious about some of the the realms of the cycling world, because there are so many different things that come together to make things work. Coaches, athletes, sponsors, you got bike shop owners, you got developers of gear for cycling, you got parents, you got all kinds of people that make the cycling world. So that's why I started the cycling Secrets from the Saddle, and I'm going to get on this and do something every week featuring somebody different in the cycling world. Now, when I talk about cycling, it could be mountain biking, road cycling, criteriums, time trials, TTs, anything that involves a bicycle, basically, and some sort of coaching and athletes. So with that, I am going to introduce Jim Glover here, who I'm super excited to start off the series back with him, because we've worked together in my cycling club. He's coached me as an athlete, so we kind of go back. But and that's a little bit of our background, right? So
just think, it's almost 20 years now.
It's funny how it's almost 20 years. It's been 20 since 2000. Yeah, so it's been 20 years since I've been on the bike seriously. And also, before we even get started, I'm going to say a big shout out to Mike Bennett of Eurosport Sports and Prologue for letting us do this interview in his basement, actually his training basement, which it's kind of where it all started.
And
yeah,
if you want to know where the very first cave for training was, this was probably it.
This was probably it, and we both trained here, and then we both coached athletes who were training here. So
created the training program,
and then
that they do
Jim,
this stuff.
Jim created the program. So we've got a really cool person here. I call him like a local coaching celebrity in the cycling world, because he has coached fair amount of people in this region, as well as some top level athletes. So let's get into Jim's background, then he's going to start breaking it all down for us. So how about that? Are you ready?
Oh, I'm ready.
I know. I sprung this on him like last week. I'm like, because remember I said I've been thinking about getting this started for a long time, and I finally just said, you got to get started. And I was like, hey, Jim, you want to be interviewed? And then I started phoning all my other friends that I know who are coaches. So you're going to get a plethora of different coaches coming up, and then we're going to dive into athletes. Anyways, it's all going to be out there. All right, so we're going to start. So first we have some stuff here. We're just going to start with all Jim's accolades, because he's got quite a few, and to coach at his level, I always think it's super important to have certifications, because I've got my level 3 National Performance Cycling certification. I guess that's what they call it now, or maybe they call it something different. But I went and got my national certification, and it's important to me as a coach. And if you're an athlete, it's important to ask your coaches if they have some sort of certification or they're part of an organization behind them. So we're going to start with Jim's stuff, and the first thing we're going to show you here, he's brought some things, is his Coaches of Canada's official, okay, you have to tell me about this, the charters.
So this one's the certification, the certificate for when I was the very first charter professional coach in cycling in 2006. So the only other guys that had that certification were me and the national team coaches like Eric Van den Eyck at the time. At that time, with the coaching program, you started with levels 1, 2, and 3, and then you had to petition the coaching association to be allowed into 4 and 5, and they actually had to accept you and say, yes, it's okay for you to go into levels 4 and 5 at that time.
Yeah, because the higher levels like 4 and 5 are the Olympic levels.
They're the Olympic levels.
And once you get, I guess you have to start.
You have to take all the tasks.
Training.
And then and then when you get done at least 12 of the 20 tasks, you're at level 4.
Oh,
when you have all 20, you're at level 5. And then on top of that, you apply for certification as a chartered professional coach.
Okay.
So that requires not only that education, but it requires that you've coached athletes at least one world championship.
Yeah.
At that point.
So
I've been working with cerebral palsy athletes. I've been working with able-bodied athletes and Olympic athletes for triathlon by the time this got around. And so I've worked with quite a few athletes across cerebral palsy, triathlon, and bicycling that have had ridden world championships or Olympics by the time 2006 got around.
Cool. So you did, because did notice that, because obviously when you get to this level, you are now officially can take on like an Olympic team. Yeah. And you did you do some?
I've
the
coached
Moscow Games in 1980?
Moscow was 1980.
Yeah.
And I was one of the qualified athletes in Team Pursuit to go to that games.
Oh, okay.
But that games got boycotted.
Oh, see, I was only like
you weren't
9
very
years
old
old.
at that point, yeah.
I was 9
You
years
weren't
old
old enough to go to the Olympics.
I was still getting over Elvis dying.
Oh, wow, there you go.
Which was 86.
Yeah. So in 1980, I was part of that Olympic team that they would have picked the qualifying team from to go to the 1980 Olympics. But we boycotted those Olympics, and the next Olympics was LA in '84.
Okay.
So that kind of ended up starting my coaching career because I could see that I was already 25 at that point.
Yeah.
In 1980, and so I'd be 29 for the next Olympics, which in essence in our country at that time I was too old.
All day, I know.
Too old at 29. Oh, guys, like now
can't put out the same kind of power.
Now I'm more than twice that old. But that was ultimately why I started taking coaching courses, because I could see that I wasn't going to be an Olympic athlete because I was good, but I was one of the guys. I wasn't the best guy.
Yeah.
And so by the time the next Olympics rolled around, they were going to take somebody younger than me if they were almost as good.
Yes.
Because then they'd have the experience to be able to make the next Olympics.
Right.
And that's how our team chose people back then. So
isn't that how they chose people?
They probably still do it that way, but I don't know. I think take the best, worry about the rest. You know, when it's an Olympics. If you're looking at other games, you can call them as getting ready for the Olympics, but and that's a little different.
But you know what's nice is that taking good athletes that train well and have excelled, and actually, you deciding to be a coach is something the sport definitely needs, right? Because you could have chosen to take your experience and done something else instead of like benefiting the sport.
Yeah, my university education had nothing to do with this. So
what was that?
I did degrees in architecture and industrial design. Oh, so
way out of the spectrum.
But that's how I got started in the sport. So
and way more fun, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, one of the guys I met at university here at Carleton was a bike racer, and that's how I got started bike racing.
So that's the first question. How did you get started in cycling?
Yeah, that's how I got started. I was at Carleton University architecture program, and one of the guys there went on to be a great architect, but he started me in bike racing, so it was kind of fun.
Did they have a team?
We didn't have a team at that time. We were just a group of guys, and happened to be a group of guys in architecture, actually. And we raced. And one of the other guys ended up going to the Écoles des Beaux-Arts and did architecture there for a term as well.
Wow.
And
Could anybody else in that group continue on with their sporting career instead
No, they
of
all
like
just
academics?
became architects.
Yeah, they did.
all became architects.
Well, we need at least one to go into sport.
And that, so, but it was fun. The guy that introduced me had been the guy who held all the local records at the time.
Ah, and you're like, oh.
So less than 2 years later, I beat all those records.
We're going to talk about that in a moment.
Yeah.
But that's going into the next one, and I think you might have answered that, was when did you know that you wanted to get into being a coach? And of course, as we know, if you've been a coach, it's not as lucrative as maybe architecture, but you can make it.
In this country, it's probably one of the least lucrative coaching jobs you could have.
Not as a cycling coach, or just like...
coaching generally doesn't get paid well in this country, but I would say cycling coaching would be among probably closer to the bottom of any of the coaches as well that get paid. Well, I'm sure your experience is the same as mine. We've known all kinds of athletes that have no problem spending 5, 10, 15 grand, 20 grand these days on a bicycle, and then say, I can't afford a coach.
Yes.
And so we're always fighting that. Yeah, we're always fighting with that. And then there's a few people who say they want to give back to the sport and coach for free.
Yeah, well, you just need to pay the bills somehow.
So those are difficult things to overcome. From that perspective. I mean, for me, in the earlier days of coaching, in the 80s, I was coaching Gord Fraser.
Yes.
And at that time, he was a group of about 5 athletes in the OBC that were considered pretty good, and Gord wasn't considered the best one at that time.
So Mike Nash came in?
Oh, no, Mike Nash is much later.
Okay.
And that, but with Gord, it was... I had to change everything I did the way I coached. I had coached in an old style that was, let's say, derogatory a lot and hard on people a lot. I've
had a coach like that.
Yeah.
But you know what? It worked on me.
Yeah, some of them work on.
I didn't take offense to it, but it made me think.
Yeah, I laughed, and that one of the things I had done back then is one of the things I would do is to help people time trial faster is I would ride right behind them in a time trial, and I laughed.
Okay, and let's just say when he coached me, he did that.
I did that.
He did that.
Yeah, I could. At that time, I could ride behind somebody instead of talking to them up to about.
That's right.
Up to about 45 km an hour.
You could go fast. I remember that.
Yeah.
And it's pushing. It
pushes people very, very hard.
Yes, it does.
But also at that time, back in the early years when I did that, I laughingly say I would insult people back at least 2 generations. Like my dead grandmother could go faster than this, and things like that. I followed, and at the time I said the rules were really simple. I said all you have to do is do what I tell you when I tell you to do it, and if you don't agree, we'll talk about it later.
Right, yeah, let's not have that conversation now.
Because if you could talk while we're riding, you're not working hard enough.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. I had one rider he was getting really, really ticked. And I sort of yelled out his name and said, if you want me to stop talking, go faster.
Well, I hope that worked.
You could go with that one, right? You can understand, like, hey, if I want, the only way you'll get rid of this guy is go fast enough that he can't talk.
But the point is, if you're paying for a coach, you're paying for this kind of
finding out
encouragement.
Yeah, you are paying for that, and it's a lot of fun after. During, maybe not so much. But the point of that is, I know from the body language and what the athlete's doing, what they have left.
Yeah.
And the athlete doesn't necessarily know, because they've never been there. And doing that, they get to find out that they can go 30 seconds faster on a 15K and not die.
Yeah, and that makes a big difference when you're racing.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that when I've talked to people outside of coaching about how you're doing things and in coaching, I said one of the things a coach has to be able to do is know the limits of an athlete better than an athlete knows their limits. For that specific reason, because a lot of athletes, if they haven't been to a higher level, don't know they can get there, and so they worry about that.
Yeah.
And so you have to be able to know that their limit is higher than they're presently at and use the right techniques to get them to get there.
Yeah.
And that's not always easy.
Yeah, and I think that goes right into their training programs too.
Yep.
And one thing that I can say about Jim's programs is that because he does most of them on watts, which if any good coach does, should.
One of the first. I was one of the first back in the 80s, actually.
Yeah, and I remember when I was training with you, and I would sometimes go over to his place, and he would put me through a program that he had on his CompuTrainer. Unfortunately, that amazing company went under, which is too bad, because those trainers were like 100%.
They're bulletproof too.
Yeah, amazing. Like, they don't break like this other stuff. But I was always amazed at how you could put together a program based on wattage and get the results. Because there's you, and I've had some other coaches, and they've all been good, and I've always taken on different coaches to learn different things from. It's not that I was a bad athlete or there was a bad coach. I just like to be coached by different people, because everybody's got different ways of coaching.
Yeah, they come at it a different way because of their experiences.
Yeah, and so I find that makes me a better coach, because I've had multiple coaches, Yeah,
like I was working with Derek G when he was switching from junior to senior.
Right.
And
Derek G.
Yeah.
He's on top, on fire, eh?
Yeah.
He's been like
He'll
that
be at
for
the
a couple
next
years.
Olympics. He'll be at the next Olympics.
Yeah.
And that so. I changed his position. I taught him some techniques, and we raised his starting power by basically 50% in one training session.
Hello. Would anybody just like 50% improvement after one training session?
Yeah. Just
learning
how to start. How to start better. Learning how to use all the different muscles. And it goes back to, you're one of the only people I've seen actually mentions breaking the pedaling stroke down that I taught you.
Yeah.
And you don't hear other coaches breaking it down and saying, here, you need to break it down
so you can put it together.
That's where I got it. It is where you got it.
Okay, it is where I got it.
Because I'm the only other one.
Yeah, because and when I do my cycling programs, we spend 16 weeks apart, but on the cycling techniques, the 4 pedal strokes, breaking it down. And I think you can't do that in the summer. There's certain things that I've always said.
The only time we did it in the summer is when we did hill repeats on pigs.
Yes. Well, no, that's what I mean. You got it. You learn it in the
winter.
In the winter here on your trainer.
Where it's safe. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you go apply it, and that's it was night and day.
Yeah.
Night and day. And that's where
where
I got it, because I preach that all the time.
But you don't see other people doing it. Very seldom do you see people talk about it, and yet it's very important.
Yeah.
Because you can see people that have great technique, and the problem actually that I've found with the people with the very best technique sometimes is that they're the people, and you see them in the pack all the time in a race. They look like they're great, they're doing wonderful, and then suddenly they're spit out the back.
Yeah.
Right? And that's because they have such good technique and they're using all the muscles properly. They have no other muscles left over for when they start getting tired. And so it's gone in a blink.
Yeah.
Whereas when you learn all these techniques, you have other muscles that you can relax, other muscles you can work, other muscles can recover, and you can last a lot longer. And even cars are doing it now, where they have they turn different cylinders off depending on how hard you're working. It's the equivalent of what a car does now to try and get better gas mileage, right?
We're just
but we were doing it a really long time ago. We won't say how long ago.
I'm not as old as Jim, but
yeah, she's way younger than me anyway.
I'm getting up there though.
Yeah.
So pedal stroke technique is I preach, and I know that my clients, when they get out on the road and they go to France for their tours, it makes a world of difference. And Jim was one of the ones where he also, when we coached, he had 9 different hill drills.
Techniques. Yeah, different techniques to climb the same hill.
Yeah, which I'm sure you could probably add to that, because I'm always
technically there's 27. To be between, well, the girls in the club, we don't need 5.
Yeah.
Right? Because doing the hill more than 5 times, you're pretty much toast by then. So
Yeah.
the idea of doing more than 5 was out of the question. But yeah, most people, as an athlete, I would probably teach 9.
Yeah.
And most people now that are listening to this are, what do you mean 9 ways of climbing a hill? Well, yeah, believe it or not, you can
You
break
gotta
it down
talk
to
to
a
one
lot
of
more.
us.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
where the secret is.
Yeah, and people go a lot faster when they learn how to do this.
Oh God, totally. Like even on the flats too, if you
Yeah.
implement that pedal stroke, like, anyways, night and day. But that's not what this is all about. If you are curious, ask questions below. And I forgot to say, make sure you subscribe so you get all the next interviews, and also put your notifications on. So yeah, so if you want to know more about that, you're gonna have to ask the questions, and you can go to Jim's website, which is peakperformancepro.ca. Now let's move on. Who are some of those key athletes that you worked with over the years besides me?
Yeah, besides I worked with a lot of the medalists in the cerebral palsy world back
Are they
before the
local
turn of the
here?
century. No, they're from all over Canada.
Oh, okay.
And that was in the late, from 96 to 2000.
Are they on like recumbent bikes, like on all
No,
sorts? Or
they're
are they?
cerebral palsy on, depending on how much they're affected,
Right.
they're on a normal bike.
Oh, okay.
The highly affected are on trikes.
Okay.
And then you have amputee athletes and you have blind athletes. And
Right.
I worked with a few blind ones as well.
Okay, so you've done you worked with multiple disabled.
Yeah.
What would you say, like?
Yeah, through till around 2000, and at that time, what the Olympics did is they made the UCI make each governing body for cycling the governing body for cycling.
Right.
So for the Paralympics, before that, cerebral palsy athletes went as cerebral palsy athletes of Canada. They didn't
Okay.
go as Cycling Canada athletes.
Oh. Okay, so they had their own category?
They didn't have a difference in category of competition, but they weren't Canadian cycling athletes. They were cerebral palsy cycling athletes
Okay.
competing for Canada.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and so the very, very first event they actually got to compete wearing Canadian colors for was in '98 in Colorado, and it was the test event world championship for disabled athletes before Sydney. It was the
Okay.
qualifying event for Sydney and in the 2000 Olympics.
Yeah.
And at that time, they had to have enough countries and enough athletes at that games to warrant putting cycling into
Right.
the Paralympics in Sydney.
Right.
So there were over 20 countries and over 400 athletes there.
Really?
Yeah.
Para-athletes?
Para-athletes at the 1998 games
What
in
do you
Colorado.
think it is now?
I have no idea. I haven't.
Because you know what? One of the things
In some
that-
ways it's good, because actually this weekend coming is a World Cup for paracycling in Milton.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, in the
Like
track.
that, on the track. Like last weekend was the able-bodied guys. Next weekend is the
Really?
the Paralympic guys.
Because I was talking, every year I go for an AGM with the FQSC, so that's for the Quebec Federation of Cyclists, and they were saying, and I got to meet a paracycling coach and a couple of the athletes, and really, like they were saying, there's just a handful of
Yeah,
them.
there's not a lot.
Because, and it's almost like our women's category, I'd say.
I was the only
But-
one carrying a woman.
Yeah, that's that because there's just so few on the start line.
Yeah.
And I was just like, you know what? There are a lot of amputees around here.
Yeah, I would
I'm
see,
like, why is there no recruiting going
No
on?
recruiting at all. For the CPs or the blind or the
Yeah.
amputees. There really isn't. Yeah, the amps are much better at
This is what we
recruiting
need to do.
in Europe. They're much better.
Well, let's just say Europe does a lot different
More.
stuff.
Yeah.
And I love Quebec for the Cycling Federation. I think that they pour a lot of money, but they,
Provincially, they're the best of any province, yes.
yeah, and that's why I stay in Quebec with my club because of that. But anyways, see, there's something that could be created. Like I know a couple para athletes that are in our club, and they don't have to be any age. They don't have to be 19 years old. Like, these para-athletes are my age. Well, they're maybe a little younger. But still, the thing is that they don't have to be like a teenager to get started.
No, they don't.
They just have to have the drive and the coach and the gear.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, you know, the money is there.
For
Something,
us,
if
for
there
us,
were more, I'm sure.
difficult.
Yeah.
As I said, like, I was working with the cerebral palsy athletes from 96 to 2000, and I was a volunteer coach position, so they just paid expenses for me to go to events. And they didn't pay me a stipend or anything, that's it. So
Yeah.
it makes it harder. But
Yeah.
I had one woman, and I'd take her to all the events anyway. Regardless
Yeah.
of that, she'd be the last place person, because it's against all the men.
Oh,
Right, there were you know, and even
Yeah.
in Colorado, I took her and knew that she wasn't going to be one of the qualifiers. You know,
Right.
we had two guys. We were really hoping both of them would qualify in both events to give us the best chances to be able to pick athletes for going to Sydney.
Right.
So, but I knew she was not going to be one of them.
Wow.
But my opinion of bringing her was so that
She has
if I don't
more.
bring one, no one else is going to bring one, which means there's never ever going to be
Yeah.
a women's category.
yeah, that's the
and
big
so that's the big issue. It's the big
is
issue.
Women's categories for road
And so
racing.
it makes it quite difficult. I actually helped her a little bit because back around 2000 or so, there was I don't know if you remember this, but there was a climb up Mount Everest with disabled athletes, disabled people, and she was one of them. That woman was one
Oh,
of them.
really? Did
Yeah.
she get up there herself?
She
Or was
she walked up
assisted?
all the way. She
Oh,
got all
wow.
the way to base camp 1. She didn't
Oh,
get any
okay.
higher. She got to base camp 1.
Still,
Yeah. And she had
standing
cerebral
on
palsy.
Everest
Yeah, she had cerebral palsy. So
is
Yeah.
a feat in itself.
Yeah.
I've been very close. Kalapatar, which is, I think is probably about 3 kilometers from base camp, but I got a good panorama of it. I'll show you later. It's all in pictures. All right, so let's move on. Now, Jim has some amazing records, and he's going to show you some pictures on his power records.
sure.
Okay, so the thing is that right here, I'm gonna, where's the best picture? Okay,
Yeah, that's probably.
this is the best picture of the bike that he was in. And I'm gonna let him explain this because he's got the world record for going the fastest time trial, right?
Yeah. Well, I hold the flying 200-meter record on a conventional position bike, so that's one of them. That picture of that bike actually is during the run at the World Speed Championships in a place called Battle Mountain, Nevada.
I think
And-
a lot of people know that.
No, they probably don't know about. Well, the Battle Mountain, Nevada is a relatively high altitude area, but they actually have a flat road for 5 miles. Absolutely
Oh.
flat for 5 miles. So
God, I can't imagine.
yeah, so that's pretty crazy. But I'm doing about 70 kilometers an hour on that picture, which was the record for conventional position bikes on that course in 2012. And I'm 57 years old in that picture. So I
young.
beat all the young guys. The other
Is-
picture that she's holding, that's the world record bike from 1986, actually. We made some adjustments from the bike in 85 to 86. And they're two
That
different
was the
bikes.
first one.
This is the first one, and that was a later bike.
Right. I don't know, this one looks more aero than this one.
Oh, this one is about 10 kilometers an hour faster.
Oh, wow.
10 to 15K faster. With the same power. We've had both bikes in the wind tunnel down at Texas A&M, so we knew exactly how to do it.
Okay, here's the question, Jim. Were you the same weight for both races? Because it is a weight to power.
Believe it or no, I was definitely lighter for this one. Definitely lighter
Are you
for
sure it
this
had
one.
anything to do with the bike?
Well, it helps. It helps. I like.
Well,
well,
it's
see,
that's what just
but the weight that I weigh more here, this bike weighs heavier. So you know.
Oh, so
balances
it
out.
does. Oh, you're lucky. And
Yeah, it's
it
almost balances
evens,
out.
It balances itself out.
Yeah.
And then this was the newspaper article.
Well, actually, yeah. This picture, this part of the picture here.
I'll put pictures up if you can't really see them because there's a lot of glare,
so
I'll just take a picture and I'll put it in.
Yeah.
But
So that was a blow up of a postcard that Alex Moulton put in every bicycle box after we did the record.
oh my God, really?
So every bike that he sold after the world record had this as a postcard in the bike, because basically what we got started, you can see from the little picture here how tiny the wheels are. They're 17 inches. And
that's like a kid's bike.
and so you think they're like, well, how can a bike with small wheels go fast? And basically, the small wheels have almost nothing to do with how fast you go. It has to do with the gearing.
What kind of gear ratio did you have on
So it sounds really impressive. We had to make our own chainring. So, because
Oh, yeah?
Oh yeah. So the chainring on the front had 86 teeth.
Is that kind of?
That's why.
That's why this is.
Yeah.
I thought
So
it was
to
just
give you
like
that-
a round pedal stroke.
No, that's how big the chainring was.
Oh my
basically.
gosh! Okay,
The chainring
I will
was
really put a picture so you can
Yeah,
see this
so-
because it's
so-
probably very hard from there.
Yeah, from there pretty hard. But the chain rings were as big as your crank arms.
Whoa! Yeah, so that's exactly what it looks
That's
like.
why it looks like you're drawing a circle there for the pedal stroke. But no, that's how big the chain ring was. So, and down on the back, Alex has a 9, 10, 11 that threads on.
Oh, okay.
So the top gear was 86, 9.
So how come it wasn't like the other way around? Like smaller gear in the front or no gear in the front with a
same,
bigger...
No, same as your regular bicycle. You put the big one on the front, little one on the back.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I was a spinner and always have been a spinner. So that made it, we didn't have to make as big a gear for that. So, because I was spinning. So for me to break that record, I averaged 122 RPM going through the speed traps.
Whoa, 122. Okay, so like I always like I had one coach, and I don't think it was you, but he had me going down blacks
That'd be me.
at
Small gear.
145.
Yeah, small gear, small chain ring. Yeah, that'd be me.
So I was like, what?
You have a long way to catch me, darling.
I know, but like, hey, so the first time I did that, I was like, oh my gosh, really? You know, when you're sitting there,
You think you're gonna bounce off the bike?
No, I thought my kneecaps were gonna blow off.
Yeah.
That too.
That too.
But the thing is that what taught me is that you have to apply power going down the hill. It's not one of those recovery points. Well, you can make it if you're one of those cyclists that hits the crest and then you automatically get into a tuck position. Those guys make me laugh. So sorry if you're one of those. But you have to work as hard down the hill as fast. So I did get up to 145 RPM, or pedal stroke per minute, down the hill. But at first I was like, whoa, what? And it took me a while. It took me probably all summer to get that.
Yeah, it takes time.
But you work as hard down the hill as up, and Jim taught me a lot of great things about that.
The part of why you want to learn how to pedal fast downhill is you can afford to do it in a small enough gear that you can run out of leg speed. And not have to have run out of power to do it. Because if you want to go fast, you have to be able to push really hard on the pedals, and you have to be able to turn the pedals really fast.
Yeah.
And you can't do one or the other, technically. I mean, unless you really know how to pedal super, super fast. One of the experiments I did is I raced a guy downhill on a hill in a training camp, and I stayed on my small chainring on a downhill. And I stayed in the second easiest gear. So I ended up peaking at 231 RPM, and I averaged 221.
Wow.
Going downhill. So I was doing over 60K an hour to do that.
Yeah. And Jim, we went to a training. Well, we did a training camp.
We did a training camp together. Yeah.
Together, and
Virginia,
one of the things that Jim did with all of us is like, you know, when you go riding in a training camp, or like even in a group. And there's no control in the group, there's always like somebody who takes off really quick. It's like I can't pedal that slow up the hill. I'm like, you will, and you'll do it now. So use some of your gears. And I remember
we had some steep hills there too.
Yeah, I remember Jim in front, so you can't pass the coach, and he would just bring all of us down, and we stayed together as a collective group. And we climbed those hills together, and we were all different fitness levels. And one of those things that, and I apply it now when I do my coaching, my group rides. I said we're gonna do this together. You know, nobody back there is going to sprint up forward because you think that, you know, you can't pedal that slow. No, you're going to learn how to pedal that slow, and it's going to be respectful in the group. And I love that because, and the other thing that was using the small chainring all the time. But the thing is that for me, I don't have a compact on the front, and I notice a lot of bikes are coming out with them. All of them have compacts. They don't have the 5439 anymore, which for me, I think is like the best gear ratio.
For most, well, you can always accommodate by putting a wider range of gears on the back. I got another bike, I actually got an S5, and I put a 5339 on with rotor rings on the front, but then I went to an 1130 on the back.
1130, okay,
so it makes up for the compact that it would have had with, say, a 28 or a 27.
I had a 1129 on the back. But seriously, like I found it always, and maybe it is, like I do have to look closely at, because I always watch people's pedal strokes.
Yeah, I've coached a bunch of people that didn't want to go that way, and then when I showed them why they should, they were faster. Like even, well, again, you know the Mackay sisters, right?
Yeah.
They when they first came out, and
okay, you want to know about like
fast women? Yeah,
fast women. Oh my God, those sisters.
Yeah, especially climbing.
Oh.
And the one sister was the very first, and may still be the only one who's won Tour of Sutton 2 years in a row.
Yeah, I was there, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the second year, I coached her exactly how to win based on the last day, not the rest of the week.
Yeah. Well, that's basically when all of us are dead.
Yeah. See, for her, she could climb so hard, and she could put it in so hard, and she was so competitive. I taught her on the bottom of Meech Lake Road, or at the bottom of Camp Fortune at Meech Lake to the gate.
Yeah.
That's the same 400 meters as the finish.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so just a little background about Sutton. So Coupe des Amériques is a stage race. So you have the prologue the Friday night, so you just basically climb up a hill for 5 kilometers. And then...
Which she could win.
Which is like... And then the next morning is the time trial, which is 12 kilometers. Nice. And then we either had like a crit or a short course road race. And then on Sunday was a 90... the last time I did it was like 110K steep, like... hilly road race.
And finish on a tough climb.
Oh, and then you finish like climbing up to the top of a ski hill, like where the lodge is. You know what those are usually like. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So I taught her how to be able to do really well in the first 2 races and do well in the time trial.
Yeah.
And then hang on for dear life and hopefully not lose time in the criterium. And
Don't crash.
Well, she was never comfortable going fast with people around her, so on corners. So, and then in the last stage, I said, as long as you're within 20 seconds of whoever the leader is, you can win. And
based on points.
Yeah, it's based on points.
Time.
Yeah, time. And I said, based on that, you can win. And I said, 30 seconds will be a little tougher, and 10's actually too close. I said, 20's a really good number for you to be back. Because when I taught her how to climb the bottom portion of Camp Fortune on that gate, you would never believe you could make 20 to 30 seconds on that stretch.
Right.
But I could teach her how to make 20 to 30 seconds on that stretch.
Oh, I never thought of that. That's a good... You always have to find examples for your finishes.
Right.
Somewhere, right?
And that was a perfect finish example. And I said, so all it meant was all you had to do is feign being tired and worn out like everybody else. And
it's all about strategy, Garrett.
Right, it's the strategy thing.
Boys.
Right,
like
and
racing is all
the strategy, right? Yeah. It's not the guy who makes the most watts. And so everybody's tired, and they're all watching you because they all knew you won last year. So the object is all you had to do was stay with them and keep bleeding people out until you got down to the last 5 or 6. And at 400 meters to go, nobody believes you could put 20 seconds on them.
Yeah.
Because everybody's theoretically going hard. But I said, I'll show you, and we trained how to put 20 seconds on somebody in that span. Yeah. So that she could win. Yeah. And that's how she won the second in a row. because they had no answer, because partly mentally they weren't ready to go any harder except for the last 50 meters, but they couldn't go from 400. But she needed the 400 to be able to make the full 20 seconds.
Right. So that's what I mean, like when you're racing, you have to have some sort of strategy. Whether you're a triathlete, you've got 3 stages you have to think about, or you do like stage races. Like the most we have in this area is like 3 to 4 stages. And if you want to come, you know, top 3, top 5 finishing, you really do have to, like, and that's something, hey, I never did. I didn't even think about it.
And your training has to reflect where you have to do what you have to do.
Right.
You know, it's not you just go out and do the miles. No, there's specific intervals to deal with specific things that are going to happen in those races that are going to make or break a race.
Right. And I remember actually applying something when I did my level 3 with Kayla, and it was for OBC. And we trained that last section, the finish, because that's
when
where
they changed the finish to
the
flat, relatively flat.
Yeah.
It was different because you had a downhill roll and then you had a flat and a false flat up, which changed the dynamics and what the finish was going to be like.
And so we trained on that, and we trained changing gears different times until she was able to keep a consistent, like just gearing until she was able to sprint for the end, and she won that the race. And then I took her to nationals, and the thing is about that is, you know, when you're a coach, you're like, I should have been somewhere else. You know, because we talked about the finish. It's all about the finish, right? If you are a certain position, coming around the corner, coming into town, down, and I mean, I said, this is where you have to sprint. You have to just really gun it, because it was a downhill, then it was like a turn like this and that to make it. But she came 4th or 5th. I'm like, she could have done it. You know, but I'm like, I wasn't in the right spot because I was sitting near the finish where I should have been on the freaking hill. I should have been on the hill.
If you thought the moment where she had to go was 400 or 500 meters back, you had to be back there.
Yeah, and because what you need is get down that hill as fast as freaking possible, get in front of everybody to take those corners.
I had a guy do that too. I had a guy do that at the World Masters in Edmonton, and I said your interval was long enough that it was 2 laps. On the finish course, and the course was too tight for people to put a train together to chase you down.
Yeah.
And it had a little climb in it that was going to break the guys that were just hanging on anyway. And I said, but you could go from 2 laps out. And I was yelling and screaming at him at 2 laps out, and he said he miscounted me. He had to go at 1, and so he didn't get his gap. Right?
Oh shit!
So he sort of laughed, because then they just rolled by him at the finish, right? So
yeah, he fully gassed himself out.
Right. But if he'd done it from 2 laps out, he would have made it.
Oh well, and then that becomes a training race.
Oh yeah.
Live and learn and apply the next time.
Yep.
So what do we have here? Just to okay, so you know, what do you find that you really love? Because we're almost to the top of the hour. Like being coaching, like as a coach, and you're not coaching a lot now, and maybe you'll get busy after this one because maybe a lot of you guys just realize you aren't training as efficiently or effectively as, like, oh my God, awesome, as effectively you are. But, you know, and on Jim's page, he does have, like, you know, different levels of coaching. And he was just telling me that he's got those 2 guys, the air pilots.
Yeah.
So he's still coaching, and he works extremely close with his clients to make their programs work. However, these athletes are super motivated, right?
Yeah.
Like you were just telling me about
these.
He coaches people all over the world. Yeah. But he was just telling me about these 2 airline pilots who race for the.
Well, one was racing as a pro in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And as a 40-year-old, he wanted to be able to race for a pro, semi-pro team in Hong Kong, but they only allowed 1 foreigner per team.
Oh, okay.
and he wanted to be the foreigner.
Ah.
And so we had to go through a few hoops to get that to work, but he ended up winning the Hong Kong Championship, so
yeah.
So it worked out good for him.
So, anyways, if you also need like somebody to organize yourself, so this we just have a couple other things. He's got a little thank you from who's this?
That was Mike Nash.
Yeah, it's Mike Nash.
That's a photo of Mike when he was doing
local.
the world hour record. Yes, he lives in Carp.
Yeah, so he still rides around these parts.
Yeah, that was when he was going for, I believe, the 45-year-old hour record bracket, and he did the 50-year-old bracket in Mexico last year.
Whoa, anything's possible.
Yeah.
That's why I'm trying to get back on the circuit this year.
Well, for the hour record, it's it's a whole lot different than doing anything else.
I don't know if I need to do the hour record.
Do I need it's an age bracket one, right? That's an age bracket one. So you'd have to go look up the UCI record for your age bracket and then after you stop cursing on how fast they go.
Oh, I know.
Then you have to decide if you want to take a shot at that or not.
The thing is about coming back as an older master, there are a lot of masters champion racers, and that's who you have to compete against. Like, it's not like your grandma here. There's a lot of ladies who are still extremely competitive. And that's why I decided to just focus on criteriums. Mm-hmm. Because I like them, I love the strategy, and I can train effectively for those. Because it's
a lot different.
Yeah, it's a lot different, and possibly stem over into time trials. But road racing?
Road racing is pretty hard because of the length of time you have to put saddle time in. There's no way around it. A 1 hour or 40-minute, 30-minute criterium based on age bracket, you can train effectively for that without having to put in 20 hours a week. Yeah. So you can do it on 10 hours a week. It's not a problem.
I know. That's why I'm doing it. I might need some help.
Yeah. Well, it's also one of those ones where the hour doesn't require any luck.
Yes.
You just do it, and as long as you don't break your equipment or whatever, you can do it. A criterium has a certain level of luck involved in the sense that someone could break away that you don't know about, or different things like that.
It's strategy,
and in that strategy aspect of the game, or you miss the break, and it's a break that wins, which doesn't happen very often. But when it does, then if you're trying to win the sprint, you're SOL.
Yeah. I know. You can be SOL pretty quickly on a crit. But the thing I like is the strategy and getting close to the front, and I have no problem, like, I've got guts in there. And I've done it long enough that I know where I can recover. And that's the thing, right, is knowing your personal output and what you have to do in between certain corners.
Yeah.
All right, so I did have this. I keep holding this up. You just want to show that? Oh, yeah. And
that
then
was the human vehicle one.
Yeah, so that goes with this, right?
Yep.
Okay, so you got a little plaque. I was just joking that 1989 was when I graduated high school. You can do the math. And then he got a nice letter from the OBC for working really closely with their women's time trials. And that brings, like, just to the close, but like I was saying, like, I partnered up with Jim to help my club put together some time trials, and he was exceptional. And the thing is, it's great to have people like you still in the community who are out there giving out free advice. I hate to say it, but
what was unique about our time trial series is having Celia involved, and she's a computer whiz and does a lot of stuff. We actually were probably the only ones that ever had done a time trial where the results were online before the athletes saw the numbers.
I know. I always like to go over and above in my club, because I'm like...
Yeah, just the way we had set it up. We'd set it up so that all the seed sheets and all that stuff was on Celia's website. But it also did all the calculating, so all we had to do was pump it into the website, and then it brought all back average speed and what your place was and how fast you went and how you went up against your PBs and all that stuff. And it was all done online in real time while we were standing there.
Yeah. That's pretty impressive. That's even better than any kind of road race.
Yeah, nobody else can do that in the world yet. Nobody.
Well, you guys should get together and collaborate on that.
I mean, technically they could, but I mean, the UCI would never do that. They would never want to allow the results out before they gave them out. So, but that just the way that it was set up.
Well, yeah,
it had to do that, right? Because technically, if you got on our site, you could see the results before we talked to people because we did all of it online.
Well,
out in the middle of the side of a road, mind you.
Yeah, that's right.
So.
But time trial is easier because
Yes,
it is a start time, a finish time. There's not much disputing going on because it's like one person usually finishing at a time, so it's pretty accurate. Yeah,
and what was nice about it, it did all the calculating. We didn't have to worry about making a mistake doing the math on start time and finish time, which I teach people all those tricks too because it can get tricky to try and figure those out sometimes.
I know. I had to do it myself.
Sometimes your brain just says, nope, I'm not doing it anymore.
If you're not into math, your head will explode. But anyways, so that concludes our first interview back with Jim Glover. And I'm super happy to have you guys watching. Now remember, subscribe so make sure you get more. Like I said, I'm going to
tell them where they need to subscribe to.
Oh, no, it's going to be on my YouTube channel.
Oh, okay.
So that's why it's going to be on YouTube, so you can subscribe there and share and also put your notifications on because I do put other cycling related little tips and stuff on there. Yeah, we're going to be back here every week. So next one, I'm not going to tell you who it is because it's going to be a surprise every week. And like I said, if you have any questions about cycling related stuff, put it in the comments because I'll get to them. I'll show Jim where they are and he can answer those too. You can go to his website, which is peakperformancepro.ca, and you can contact him there too. So thanks a lot, guys. Have an amazing day and make sure you're training on your bike. Bye. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks a lot. Good to see you again.